me welcome everyone. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm your host, creator of the forum, and your cat herder for this hour. I'm very glad to see all of you here today. We have a lot to cover today, a fascinating project, but before we do that, let's begin by introducing the forum, what it does, where it comes from, who supports it, and where it's going. So, if we could turn over to the next slide, please, we can begin. First of all, you should know that the forum is the discussion-based spin-off from the Future Trends in Technology and Education report. And that's a monthly trends analysis that takes a look at major trends and drivers in education and technology and maps them against a major chart of about 86 of those trends. We've been doing this for years now, so we have a pretty good database of trends, all backed by evidence. And it's a good way for looking ahead to try and extrapolate where education and technology could go. If you're new to it, just go to ftte.us or check out the Twitter hashtag FTTE. Next slide, please. You should also know that and the forum are both part of an overall project called the Future of Education Observatory. This is a multimedia, participatory, ongoing effort to try to increase our intelligence about where education could be going. If you haven't seen it, go to futureofeducation.us and you'll find links to the FTT report and to this forum, as well as to our blog, to our book club, to a bookstore, and several other projects that are just unfolding. So go to futureofeducation.us to find more. Now, if we're going to be having this kind of conversation, it's important to do it in as global a way as possible. So over to the next slide, please, Tara. When we try to have these conversations to understand where education could be going and the role of technology, it's vital to have the conversation as globally as possible. And we've been trying to do that here. So we've had participants from all over the world, from just about every continent. And we've had guests from almost every continent as well. Please, if you haven't had a chance to look back at our archives, you can see examples of conversations we've had across multiple time zones and nations. It's really important to be able to do this right now, especially in 2018. Over to the next slide, please. Now, to talk about where this comes from, we also have to be able to acknowledge our very generous sponsors, and I'd like to do that now. So to begin with, we're grateful to NYSERNet in New York State. That's a nonprofit that helps connect that state's colleges, universities, museums, and libraries to broadband internet. And we're very grateful to NYSERNet for their support. We're also grateful to Shindig, because as you can tell, they make available this technology. So let me just walk you through it and show you a few of the key pieces. So where I am right now and where this PowerPoint presentation is for the next couple of seconds is called the stage. Everybody can see and hear what goes on up here. This is where our guest will be in just a minute, and this is where any participant can be. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Below us is what I think of as the participant swarm. This is something called the audience. This is where all of you are. And if you look down, you can see either shadowy silhouettes for people like Stephen Crawford and Ian Olstein, or you can see video feeds for Paul and for Roxanne and David Stone. And those all represent one person or more people who have signed in. And if you'd like to learn more about them, there's two ways. One is double click on them. And if they feel like talking to you and their mic and their camera are working, your two icons will click together like Lego bricks and you can have your own conversation. Now, there are a lot of ways to communicate with other people here. I want to show you three of the major ways because this is a discussion-based forum. Look down the very bottom of the screen. There's a white strip running across it, and it has several different options. So if you look on the left edge of it, you'll see what looks like a kind of a bunch of heads and a dialogue box from a comic strip. If you click on that, two windows will open up. On the left will be a kind of film strip listing of everybody who is here right now. Right now it looks like about 20 people. And you can just scroll through that and take a look at who Brenda is and Karen Whitefield and Christopher. And if you want, you click on them and learn more. But to the right of that, you'll see a chat box with a bunch of people right now who've been introducing themselves. So there's Myra, Tara, myself, Stephen Crawford, David Stone. So you can ask questions and make comments there, and people will do that. So that's one way to interact. Now, on that white strip to its right, you'll see a question mark in a circle. If you click that, up will pop a little box so you can type in a question or a comment. And that question or comment, we can flash on the screen so everyone can read it, and I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it. So that text is a second way of doing it. And the third way of interacting, and this is the best way, is what looks like a little raised hand icon. If you click that, you tell us that you want to join us up on stage. So if your microphone is working, your camera is working, and you're in a place where you can speak out loud, click that, and you can join us up on stage. In fact, we can fit up to 4 people here at a time. So think of it as a panel that you can form just by clicking on it. So through video, through the text, through the chat box, all kinds of ways for you to participate. And that's what this is really all about. I look forward to hearing your questions and comments. I'm grateful to Shindig for making this available. We have one other source of support that I want to gratefully acknowledge, and that is our friends and supporters on Patreon. If you haven't been to Patreon, Patreon is a kind of it's like Kickstarter or GoFundMe for creative projects and creative people. If you go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, you'll see dozens and dozens of people who contribute to keeping this whole effort of making multimedia participatory conversation about the future of education going. So if you look at this slide, you'll see Jeannie Kim Han, Bob and Kyle Johnson, Robin DeRosa, Joanna Richardson, Michael Haggins, Corey, yes, a whole bunch of people. Little as $1 a month. You can chip in and keep the lights on and the machines humming. We're very grateful to people on Patreon for their support. Now, that's how this is supported. That's where this comes from. That's how the technology works. Let me introduce this week's wonderful guest. So I'm very, very grateful to have on our show today Claire Nelson. Claire is a futurist and a sustainability engineer. She's the founder of the Futurist Forum, and for all kinds of reasons I want to have her here, but most recently she led the production of a great report called Providentia's Prospectus, which is an all-female author futures work. There aren't many of these, and we were very excited by the content and also by the idea of having a futures work edited only by women. So let's get rid of this slide and bring Claire up, and let's start talking. Greetings, Claire. Can you see and hear us?
Can see and hear you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, welcome. I'm so glad that you had the time to come and share with us today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Let me begin by asking, first of all, what are you working on this year? What are you doing with the Futures Forum?
Well, my passion is global challenges. My background is international development. I worked for 30 years at the Inter-American Development Bank and worked on various topics and themes. So I'm sort of a gadfly. So although I'm an engineer by training, I like to tell people I've been engineering change because part of my work was to work with governments to help them design their portfolios once they've been elected, usually around technical changes that had to be made in any sector. So I've worked on various sectors. And that's what kind of led me to the business of futures. When we started doing lending for policy, so we do an education policy loan, for example, and I'm mentioning that because your audience is interested in that issue particular. I remember having a conversation with the person saying, well, shouldn't you be having sort of a research about what's going to happen, and should the group include people in the financial sector, in the insurance sector, because at that time people tend to only have what I call group think in the room, and that led me to thinking that part of the reason why we're not able to do a better job of providing quote unquote a teleological solution to problems is that we're using only the tools of hindsight in planning, and that the tools of foresight need to be more explicitly used by people who are doing investments in long-term planning for the future. And so I try to introduce foresight as a tool in the institution. That didn't go over too well, but I persisted in my own work. So, I mean, you can't change everybody, you just change yourself. And so I started using the tools of foresight in my work ever since. And once I left the bank, I started this organization largely to do two things. Number one, to try to create a community of people interested in global challenges and using foresight in development. And secondly, because I really didn't intend to start an organization, but I found that the major institutions that use foresight, which is the big four consulting firms, as well as the futures consulting companies, were really not open to me. And I recognize that there's a gap in terms of the minority voice in the futures community. And being clear means that I never ever just grumble. After I grumble, I say, well, what can I do? And that's how this book actually, or this booklet actually happened. I was grumbling to somebody about, oh, every year these men come out with these futures trends. I mean, I just wish somebody would come with something else. And I said, well, you know, well, rather than grumble, do something. I said, well, I don't have anything to say.
Mhm.
So I said, but some women should have something to say. And so I
Mhm.
sent an email out to some of the women futurists that I know. And I said, and this was very last minute, and this was like December the 26th. So it was not in the grand scheme of mine. And I said, look, I know it's last minute, but can you all in 10 days send me something? So 9 people responded, and then I just basically went through and so that's but really in a larger sense my work is around global challenges, and my platform is how we share the future. And I see 30 global challenges that require global a commitment, and one of them is the issue about decision making, who is at the table, and who will own all this data, and who will control the rules around all this data that we are going to be generating in the next in 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
That's fantastic. That anticipates very nicely and answers thoroughly my next question, which is how Providentia's Prospectus came about. Um, just a quick question. If I could ask, Clip, where are you based? Where have we found you today?
I am based in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I would like to say I'm almost a native Washingtonian. I've spent more than half of my life here. I've been here since 1981. That's a long time, given
Oh, it
Washington is a very
is.
town. Yes, but I think what I like about this era is that I like government, and I like governance, and I like global challenges. And so it's really not many places you can go in the world and work and be in a space where so many people from all around the world are working on these issues. So
Quite
I
true.
persist. Yes.
And one little question is, do you still have snow on the ground?
No, no, it melted off. We had our last snowstorm last week, and I was very thankful. I said, "This is the last of it." It was on the day of spring, or the day before the day of spring, but spring has truly sprung. I think we're at 60 degrees, and so you're seeing a lot more notices for events beginning to pop up on your screen.
Oh,
Indeed, in
okay.
fact, I think Atlantic Council will be having a foresight workshop in May, and that's been done in partnership with the engineering department at University of no, at Penn State. So
Hmm.
I know that the US is not into national planning, but the Federal Foresight Network that exists has been trying to, come together and do sort of a de facto planning process. So I know for those of you who are not in the Beltway, do not despair. You might see a lot of crazy stuff happening in Washington D.C., but the people who are like in the trenches are still trying to maintain some sort of vision about what we think the future of America might emerge as.
Well, we'll have to come back to that because that's a lot to cover. Let me just
It's a
let,
big
let
issue.
me
It's a big issue.
and I have questions, friends, all kinds of questions. But please, those of you who know me know I can ask questions all day long. The important point is to hear questions from all of you. So as we go, again, greetings to people who've just joined us, like Vanessa. As you have questions and comments, please use any of those three tools at the bottom of the screen to get them rolling towards us. One to ask you, Tim, back to Providentia's perspectives. And by the way, thank you so much for doing that. It came at just the right time. A bunch of us have been talking about the gender imbalance in futures work, and then this was like, aha, here we go, a bunch of women doing futures work. Um,
Yeah.
let me begin by asking, of all the 18 findings, and we can walk through them if everyone wants to. What are the ones that really stand out for you? What are the ones that seem to have the biggest impact on the globe?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was shocked by. Well, let me just tell people we looked at the usual trends. So it's political, economic, health, and social environment, and technology. Now, normally we don't take out health, but the reason I took out health out of it because I felt like that would be very interesting, because I was surprised that somebody raised the issue of increasing depression globally. And I thought, that's interesting. Um, I don't know if I want to necessarily agree with it, but I thought interesting that, and I left it there because as a voice of somebody coming from Latin America. So we had two futurists from Latin America, Mexico to be precise. We had two
Mhm.
from Africa, from Kenya and South Africa. We had
Mhm.
two from Australia, one from Europe, and the person from Europe was from quote unquote Eastern Europe, and then I think
Mhm.
the three of us from the United States. And so when I saw that, I started thinking through how that could happen, not just for Latin Americans, which have been having really stagnated growth. A lot of the region is stagnating. And as you know, with all the
Mhm.
uprising again, it's like we have a new round of uprisings in Brazil and Venezuela, which are some of the countries that are driving the whole region. And Mexico is still marred in the constant violence with the terms of the drug lords. So I can see how Latin American women in particular could feel like, will we never get out of this? This just the fatigue of continually trying to fight the good fight and make ends
Mhm.
meet. So even
Mhm.
though they would not be depressed in the US context of you go to the doctor for depression, there's a sort of
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
depression in terms of the lack of hope rising, which is very important factor in social capital formation for any kind of social change. And so
Ah.
that's why I left that in there, because for me, if you unpack that, um, but the counter to that, I must say, thankfully, is the women's leadership. So you see, on the one hand, somebody saying on the health level we have depression, but then in January we are confronted with women around the world who are saying, "Hell no, we are not going to go back, and we're going to take center stage." And so for me, it's a very good counterpoint between, on the one hand, we could see this trend, but on the other hand, that trend is actually driving some people to say, "I will not be stymied. I have a family to feed. I have this to do, and I'm going to rise up and take stage. I have the right to my opinion." So the leadership
Mhm.
one was not surprising, given what happened last year, and in fact, I thought it very exciting. I mean, one of the things I do for the last 4 years, this is my fifth year. Every March, I do a podcast with, again, women from around the world who are making change happen. And last year, I did only futurists, and I was very excited. They were all excited. In New Zealand, the people from around the world, like, oh, I'm so excited by the women rising. And so I think that is something that is interesting. Now, the other one that I found globally important, and it's important for people
Mhm.
in the education sector in particular, is this idea of unemployment.
Mhm.
Unemployment.
Mhm.
Because work that we have to do, the work that we have to do as planners and decision makers around what is it that we need to be teaching, what is it we need to be doing in terms of education training, has to think about where will work be in the future. So is the unemployment happening because AI and robotics have made humans redundant? Or are there indeed gaps that need to be filled, but people are not being trained to fill those gaps?
Ah.
So, why is this unemployment happening? So, we need to kind of figure out what that really is about, and all of us working in the different spaces need to really be thinking about, if I see rising unemployment in my county or state, then what do I need to be doing differently? Or in my country, what do I need to be doing differently? Is it because there are jobs that are available, but we don't have people trained to do those jobs, or there just no jobs, period?
This is for those of you who are just getting to Providentia's Prospectus. Those three trends are numbers 1, 4, and 3. So number 1 is women as leaders. Number 4 is unemployment, and number 13 is the one about depression, especially suffered by women. Those are three huge, huge forces. Um, if I could ask Claire, until other people have questions they want to ask, and again, please don't let me hog the mic, friends. Um, how do those impact education globally? That is, do you think we're going to see more and more efforts to try to shape curriculum towards fields that we can't automate? Or do you think that we're going to shape curriculum and pedagogy to try to strengthen women who are suffering from depression?
No, I think I don't. I think we ought to be focused on education that allows us to recognize and the new emerging future we want to create. The education industry, quote unquote, was designed, I think, let's say 17th, 18th century to provide for an industrial society. And a lot of even the way classrooms are designed in elementary schools around the world, right? Of course, coming from the Caribbean region, our whole system was first designed to support the colonial idea of what the colonies ought to be studying. So I studied in high school in Jamaica based on a curriculum that was set in London and Cambridge, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Subsequently, and that happened in all of Africa and India. So subsequently, we now have in each region our own examination councils that are trying to, that have been trying in the last 30, 40, 50 years to reorient training to quote unquote local needs. Now, local needs are no longer local needs totally because local is now also global. So
hmm,
we now need to educate people who are being born now to be global citizens, to be part of a global planetary society. And so the education at the elementary level, I'm so sorry for these kids, they have so much they have to learn, has to be
yeah,
more about not just teaching them to pass a test to know they know certain basic quote unquote common information that people know. So most people in the world will know that Shakespeare exists, right? Most people in the world will know certain facts of world history, right? But we also have to teach people how to continually learn and relearn and unlearn, given the changes in the job market will be so rapid. And if we are talking about moving towards an AI driven society, really helping us as humans understand what the humans need to know and understand collectively to survive and go beyond survive and thrive in 2030, in 2040, in 2050, when those of you who are designing for people who are in kindergarten, quote unquote, will be now, be 35 years old or 45 years old. That is the challenge that educational planners are faced with.
hmm, hmm. That's a huge challenge, a global one, not just a local one.
Yes. So, for example, I did some work in Suriname in the bushes one. So, in the culture, in the tribe I was speaking to, in that culture, young people of a certain age are not allowed in the same room as the older people.
Hmm,
So I was looking around and
hmm,
I was seeing a lot of like garbage on the ground. And I'm saying, we're up in the bush and I'm seeing all this plastic. This is like terrible. I'm seeing plastic in the river. The river is what provides life, fish, water, bathing. How are they not being told that plastic does not have the same value as your old clay pots? So you just can't throw the plastic the way you would throw your old clay pot because the clay pot will dissolve after 6 months, a year. And then I asked somebody, is the school system teaching the kids in the village about sustainability, waste management? And they said no. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like a disaster. So I can only imagine that in another 5 years, way up in the hinterlands of wherever, right, whether it's Suriname or the Brazil or wherever, we're gonna have rivers now, not just oceans, clogged with plastic bottles from Coca-Cola and all the things they're bringing upriver by boat. So these are the things I'm saying. Education systems, especially in developing countries where I'm more familiar with, really have to do a rapid rethink to make sure that sustainability is on the agenda from kindergarten all the way through to university. No young person graduating from university in the Caribbean or Africa should be graduating without a basic concept of sustainability.
How do we do that without reinscribing old colonial attitudes on those
I think
nations?
I think I think that the UN Sustainable Development Goals provides
Mhm,
an opportunity for the education community to say, look, we're the Global Association of XYZ, and we're going to advocate for this in elementary schools around the world, or in high schools around the world, or in engineering schools around the world, because we have all these professional associations that are global. So one of my passion is, how do I, as a futurist, infiltrate enough people in these
Mm,
professional communities to sort of get them to really hang a piece of their work on the global challenges.
that's a great question. That's a terrific question. And that's one who, as another futurist, I hear you. There aren't many of us. It's a big world to
So
influence.
my so one of my quote unquote entry points was, for this year March, I interviewed a Nigerian woman who is the woman's vice president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. So I
Oh,
interviewed
nice.
her about her role. And of course, in the interview, I began to see the idea that her role could be to support women engineers, especially those in universities around the world, to take a front seat in promoting the SDGs in their work. So, you find ways of beginning the conversation, and hopefully somebody glums onto it. And then if they do, you introduce them to somebody else, and you kind of get things moving. So I'm one of these eternal optimists that I do believe that, you know, one person plus one person plus one person can form enough of a bandwidth of people to make a tipping point for change to happen.
I hear you.
I hear
And
you.
that's
And
what we're trying to
that's
do
what
here in
we're
the
trying to do
forum
here in
in
the
our own
forum
way.
in our own way.
Uh, Friends, I have more questions to ask, but I would like to ask you if you haven't had a chance to take a scroll through the report and take a look at the findings, the major issues that we have. What we haven't touched on yet are a few ones, including rising insecurity, which ties into some of the trends that Claire has mentioned, increasing incidents of fake news connected with social unrest. We also have the decreasing use of GDP. And now that I know you have a background in banking and sustainable development, I'd love to ask you about that.
Yes.
Where do you think we're going to go past GDP? What are the leading new measures that you see out there?
Well, that's a big conversation that a few people have been, I would say, trumpeting for several years. But hopefully, again, as we all across the world struggle with the issue of rising inequality,
Hmm.
and recognize that growth alone does not create well-being for enough people, right? If growth is not distributed to people, as we have jobless growth in America, for example,
Hmm.
then at the end of the day, we're going to have unrest and unease, quote unquote, in the social spaces. And so you have a lot of people looking at new new measures, new metrics around economics, sustainability indices, a well-being index. This is being discussed. We don't have like one which has risen to, let's say, a global use that is fully understood as yet. But I know that there are actually people working on trying to find, can we find one or two or three that have been used at local levels and surface those.
Hmm.
And my argument in that, find one or two or three that the average taxi driver can understand. And I say the average
Hmm.
taxi driver, in this case, let's call it a Lyft or Uber driver,
Ah.
because they tend to meet a lot of different types of people, right? So they of themselves can be almost like the meme carriers of an idea. Because if they
Ah.
understand it, so how do we get an idea to, move like a virus through the system, right? How we get a meme to move? And so when I go home to Kingston, or actually any country I go to, I kind of ask the taxi driver, like, so what's happening? To get a sense of what's the feel on the ground, what's the mood of the people on the ground.
Yeah.
And usually I always ask about some national planning issue, and they will go into what the government is not doing. It's always exciting to hear what they're upset about, because that gives you a good sense of what's happening. So I've been telling people, if a taxi driver does not understand this measure, don't even bother, because you can't make social change happen if the average populace don't know what we, the pundits, are up here talking about. It's just a waste of time.
Do you think the Gini coefficient is something that we can use for now?
Oh, God. Let me explain something. I'm an engineer. I have a PhD. I work in the IDB and the World Bank and all those things for years. And I still don't know what the Gini coefficient is, okay? Because I just don't think like that. So, yes, I might have done calculus and all these things, but what does it mean? I can't tell a story about, like I love Gini. If I can find a way to create an I love Gini story about the Gini coefficient and I could sell it, then fine. But if I can't do that, then
that's great.
Because
Thank you.
Because one of the skills that I have is that in my other life, I tell stories. So if I can get an idea which I can say, oh, my 7-year-old self or my 9-year-old self understands what that means. And I go, now I can share that idea with an average audience of politicians who don't care. Politicians just want to win votes. And they're very short term. The average congressperson has basically 15 months because they get elected. Then by the time they start doing something, they have to go into election mode again. And because I do a lot of work on the Hill. I advocate on the Hill. So I know when I'm talking to their staffers, I have to sell my idea. So it ties into what I think that they think they may want to do because it's going to make them look good. So if we're advocating for education to create an America that works for more people, right? And I must say, I personally am a pro-public education person. And I came to this understanding when I was wanting about 10 years ago. I was asked by NEA to do something, right? And I realized, oh my God, if we go into all of these private schools and charter schools and people do what they want, we're going to have 186 different Americas. This does not make sense. Where you learn to be American is in the school system. So if people are going off to their own little charter school for the Caribbean people, charter school for the Hispanics, charter schools for the Muslim, charter schools for the scientists, charter schools for the artists, where are you going to learn to be American? And the public schools are suffering. So one of my passions, even though I'm not an educator, I think my mother was a teacher, right? So maybe that's where I get it from, is that there needs to be attention to the public education system, or we're going to have a really disastrous outcome in 30 years in America. It's not going to look good.
That's a tremendous answer. And thank you for criticizing Gini. Thomas Piketty likes to make fun of Gini too. But before I ask more, we have a question from, let's see, is this David Stone? Let's bring him up on stage. So this is how we can cram more people here on stage to talk back and forth. Let's see if his connection works.
All right. Can you hear me?
Hi, David. Yes.
Hi. So, Dr. Nelson, I have a question for you. This week we're in the middle of Startup Week here at Penn State, and we're trying to bring more people in who have different perspectives about starting companies. Because I think when we started doing that initially, we had a lot of people who are from Silicon Valley. And quite frankly, a lot of white male companies and things. We're trying to bring more people in. And so one of the things we struggled with at a place like Penn State is trying to find ways to bring in new ideas, bring in greater diversity to the institution, and also find speakers and folks to kind of help broaden the horizons of our students. So I'm wondering, in terms of your future trends forecasting, how you find the voices for your research. I know a lot of the press and things. There's a lot of focus on large multinational corporations and a lot of other kind of agendas that are out there. I'm just kind of curious how you kind of find people to connect with and build your network to kind of get good information about the current state of the world and what's happening.
I would say I find people because, number one, I've always worked in an international space, and I'm members of various organizations because I have sort of I would say, I don't like to put myself down, but a gadfly personality, and that I would say, like, but in a nice way, I'm a systems thinker. So I'm gonna say it that way. So because I'm a systems thinker and an engineer, so I might be in a women's engineering organizations, but I'm Caribbean, so I'm active in the Caribbean community. So, and then I do drama sometimes. I know some people in theater. So I kind of know all sorts of people. And because it's my interest, I'm very interested and passionate about uh, inclusion at the thought leadership level, right? And so
Mhm.
occasionally, for example, I was invited by World Steel, a gentleman from Pennsylvania who didn't know me from Adam, called me and said, "Look, I'd like you to speak on sustainability." He was a white male. Why did he invite me? Because he was looking for a non-white male person who who had enough engineering skills to kind of know what they do and also had a sustainability bent. And he found me on LinkedIn. I mean, who who would have thunk it? So once people are prepared to look for people, I think there are people out there. Um, so the people I've been interviewing over the years around the world are people who I've looked for. So anytime I'm doing a theme, I try to have a diverse perspective. I might have one white male, an Indian male, a Chinese female. I try to really look at balance in designing that. I have to say, in terms of talking about inclusion and diversity, I had the opportunity a couple years ago to do a workshop for the SEC on on diversity. So I said, listen, I'm not a diversity expert, so I'm going to do it from my perspective. So I turned it into a conversation on creating a high performance organization for the future, because it's not about what the law says. It's about how do you as a company, or in this case the SEC, I did it for two government organizations actually. How do you, as a government organization, provide the best information necessary for the American publics that you serve if you are so exclusionary in your work, as I am the legal department and I don't speak to the engineers, or I went to this college and I don't speak to people. And so I use it from more a cultural lens, and I designed, using my theater experience, a different kind of a workshop, which I think they did not expect. I did not touch on the law at all. I don't care what the law is how do you as a person recognize a common skill, talent that somebody who may wear a turban and eat a curry has, that allows you to listen to them and have that person contribute to the output of your organization or your department. And so I want to see that conversation on inclusion and diversity move beyond the letter of the law to how do we create high performance organizations that solve the problems that are current and that are emerging for the best American um, a community or organization or government organization that exists. That's what I try to do in my work.
So when you speak with companies, do you do some sort of gap analysis of kind of what you see in terms of what they're
Well,
uh,
Well, in that occasion, I think I was just asked to do this training. So I don't know who was in the room, but I just designed it that way. Obviously, I do some work to see what is the company doing, or organizations, what are their responsibilities. And it was just a one short term thing. It wasn't like a long term thing. If I was doing a long term thing, I would spend more time designing it with more level of detail to the different units. But I do think that in order for us to have companies, especially government companies, as well as companies which I call are linchpin firms. There are some certain industries that if they fall, a lot of other things fall, right? So those industries, it's very important that those industries are prepared to weather the storms of change in terms of how the global use of that product, like steel, for example, might impact on their future. So when I was at the workshop in London, it was a very small one. It was only like 14 of us in the room, and they were gathering information, and they invited four of us experts in to talk about the future of sustainability of steel, right? And it was a very interesting dialogue as we spoke to these people who work on sustainability. How are they going to get companies, the world's largest steel owning companies, to really be at the forefront of the global change around sustainability? And it was a very exciting um, conversation for the four of us from different lens to say, here's how you talk to people who would not normally want to hear this stuff. Here are ways you could test and try.
That's a great question, David, and that's a really, really rich answer. Claire, you began by saying that you weren't just a diversity expert, but I think you've shown to have a tremendous amount of expertise with diversity.
Well, I'm not a diversity expert in the sense that I didn't study it, but because my passion is for change making and recognizing that we're all going to either sink or swim as a human family, then we have to get to the stage where, as I was saying to Tara on the thing, like, I'm so excited. Imagine we can speak in real time to people in different places around the planet. It's like I'm on Star Trek. I feel so excited. I'm talking to people like, where you people based? So how can we now get beyond what I call our reptilian brain that says, Brian is a white guy with a beard. I mean, these guys are strange. I'm a black woman from Jamaica. I don't know. I can't talk to Brian. How do we get beyond that to have a soul to soul conversation about how we both survive?
Yes. Well, let's see if we can keep.
Go beyond surviving. How do we thrive? Who wants to just barely survive? What kind of life is that?
Yes.
We want to thrive.
Yes.
Right?
Hold that thought for a second. We have one more person who wants to join us. Patrice, let's see if we can bring, I think Patrice is in upstate New York right now. Let's see if she can join us. And David, stick around for a second on the stage. Let's see if we can get all the connections working. Hello, Patrice. Can you see and hear us?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Good to see you.
Great. And yes, I'm in Ithaca, New York, where we have a little bit of snow left, but not too much. I
know. I went to in Buffalo.
Okay. Yes, but they get a lot of snow in Buffalo.
Yes.
But I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about access to education for women. I think, one of the pathways to more thriving communities is by educating more women. And we've demonstrated we can create and push content out really well, but access to that content seems to continue to be a barrier. And I think one of your trends had to do with access to mobile technology. And I was wondering if you've seen any trends in women having greater access to education because of greater access to mobile technology, and what we can do as educators in that area to focus on that problem.
That's a good question. Now let's look at it from two perspectives. In the Caribbean region in particular, the access to education for women is not an issue, right? It's more access to education for poor people in general, right? Because going to school is by law, but the question is, can you afford to buy the books? It's not about gender. In fact, in the Caribbean region, women in education are performing better than boys. In fact, there's a big crisis around boys in schools. They're not doing well. So that's one thing. But let's look at Africa, where that is a real major issue, right? And Asia. But Africa I know more about. So I think what is missing and what would be interesting, because Cornell is a big school and you have a lot of people from all around the world there, it might be interesting for you to consider some sort of project that recognizing that most people don't have smartphones, right? They have text phones because they can't afford a smartphone. But what if you could find a way to push out in modules that can somehow be shared on television, and then you use a text-based platform for women and girls, let's say in rural Africa, to have more access to information. That, I think, if you can do something around that, you will get a lot of traction. Because that's the question that the World Bank and the African Development Bank are trying to answer. How do we more rapidly? And one of the particular issues will be around healthcare. So let's break it down to healthcare. I'm saying we have this huge youth bulge that they're talking about, right, in Africa.
Yep.
But you also have a huge gap in terms of healthcare providers. Duh! Why not have a way of everybody doesn't have to go to school for 4 years to learn how to draw blood or how to be a healthcare worker or how to do a preventive healthcare. Why not have a project that tests like an allied health uh, education initiative that allows the few doctors that are left in Africa not to be so overburdened to have to teach all these classes? But why don't we have a project that uses virtual reality and augmented reality to train, quote unquote, allied health workers? Use a lot of these young people who went to school in Africa, high school, but can't find jobs, right? To now do the work. And so I think there are lots of young people right now that are, especially in East Africa, and it wasn't Ghana and Nigeria, who are working with apps, trying to design apps to do different things. Is there an opportunity for people like yourself at Cornell to say, okay, let's find maybe like 10 of those young people who are already doing apps in the region and partner with them to create something that they could now, turn around? So and that would be helpful because again, it's only, even though most of the parents now, I think, I wouldn't say all, but you see a big groundswell in Africa in terms of even fathers saying their girls have to go to school. The largest
Yes.
pushback you're having is in fundamental Muslim that are
Hmm.
trying to infiltrate um, um, Africa, which is a big shift because before it wasn't as like I'm a Muslim, therefore. So it's a new wave of quote unquote radical Islam trying to change the way Islam has been in Africa all these years. That's why you see these girls being kidnapped in Nigeria, etc. That's not the norm. So you have a lot of even Muslim fathers who want their girls to go to school. So, but the issue is the cost. So
So
how
back
do
to
you
Pi.
make it? How do we make it using smartphones, um, television, radio, which is the cheapest form, which is radio, to begin to provide this basic information that girls can have access to? I think that would be a tremendous help in Africa and I dare say Asia as well.
What a fantastic
That's
question,
great. Thank you.
Patrice. And what a great answer. I think this may be the first time anyone has mentioned radio in a positive way on the Future Transform. That's terrific because that totally works. If I could, David, please go ahead.
I have a follow-up question. I'm just wondering, those of us in higher education institutions, they're looking for ways to authentically engage right with other countries and other kind of needs around the world. What have been some good examples of partnerships between universities with people in other countries on some of these kind of global challenges, and specifically in education? In my case, I'm curious.
I don't have any specific partnerships, but I do know, for example, the Women International Research Engineering Seminar. I don't know if they had one recently, but about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I went to one, and they were trying to link women engineers around the world. But partnerships is something that I'm very interested in, and I would suggest um, just where you are alone, right? I'm sure if we nose around, we would find diaspora people from the countries you want to work in the region, or certainly I can find you some, right, of whichever way place you want to work, right? That would that are looking for partnerships to go back and do something at home. So, for example, in my case, I'm always trying to find partnerships for the universities in the Caribbean region, right? But I have also talked to my friends who are African who are trying to do things at home, but because this is not their passion the way it is mine. They want to do something, but they don't have like the know-how. But because I do this, I know how to say, okay, here's what you do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. But how do we find the US universities that want to do that kind of partnership? That's the question. So I think they are right now. At one point, the State Department, well, the old State Department, had a very robust program called Diaspora um, Alliance or something like that. But in any case, what they were trying to do is identify organized diaspora leaders from around the world here in America that wanted to invest back home and trying to find ways to help them to do this. Education is a major thing. So as we know in Africa, again, for example, there's a lot of African engineers and doctors in America. I mean, a huge amount. And many of them are still plugged into their hometown association or their university alumni. So if so you could possibly find a person who could help to be the go-between to keep it going. So you have a person from that space who is here in America, right? Who might have a partner on the ground that needs help to say, okay, let's do a partnership around XYZ. Oh, so that's one way. If it's just school to school, right? If it's state to state, then the approach I would take is many embassies, because I work a lot with some of the people here in Washington who are in embassies. Many embassies have an attaché who kind of is interested in these kinds of things and always welcomes an opportunity for being able to say, Mr. Minister, back at home, I have a university that wants to partner with a university to do XYZ, right? But it's always best if you already have, because I know these people, it's always best if you already have a person on the ground who is passionate. Otherwise, you get spun around back and forth. Trust me, I know this personally because I myself have been burnt out trying to doing things at home because I didn't find the right person. So I had a passion, but I didn't have the right partner. So currently, for what I am doing, I have the right partner on the ground. So I don't have to send an email, then I wait. You know, and then I look stupid because I already called you, or you already called me, and I said, oh yes. Then I called Jamaica, and then nobody answers for 6 weeks, and you said these people aren't serious. So I like to find a passionate person on the ground that says, okay, David Stone's looking for XYZ. I say, hold on, let me make some calls. I make some calls. I find a person on the ground that is passionate, that is like, I just need some help. Please send me some help. I said, I found you some help. Then I pair you two, right? That's kind of how it works best. Once it's top down, and the other reason as well for this is because sometimes many people on the ground have gotten used to waiting for help to come from America. That doesn't work in the long run. Where is the empowerment? I am not in the business of supporting charity. I don't have no time for that. So anything I do has to be about empowering people who already have stepped out and said, I can only do this. I'm going to do what I can do with the little bit I have. Then I say, let me get you help to build your thing going. That's what I'm interested in doing. I'm not interested in dealing with charity mentality. I can't work with that. So I prefer to always now find somebody who is passionate, that's driven, that's try to do the best that they can do with the little they have, and I give them support. And that's the approach I'm saying. Any university here that wants to partner in any country in the world, find the person who is most passionate. Otherwise, you invest too much time in them thinking you are helping them and they're doing you a favor because it's really that you're going to look good when you do this. It doesn't work for any one of us. It doesn't build empowered peoples.
You need a passionate agent on the ground. David, that's a great question, and Claire, what a fantastic answer. We have, please, David and Patrice, stay up for a second. We have a question from Roxanne Riskin. Let's see if we can have this on the screen. This is Roxanne, who is a stalwart of the forum. Always glad to see her. How would you grade U.S. higher education institutions in their action and thinking and providing university students opportunities and experiences on your top 5 global challenges? Great question.
Well, I'm going to say something which is very weird. I'm only really familiar with universities here in this area and Purdue, right? Because that's where I went to school. And I spent the most time. I just started reaching out. Yeah, I went to school there. Now, for me,
great.
So the engineering school there, I give them an A. They're on top of it. They're on the ball. I can tell you, Here in DC, I'm rather surprised by the lack of in engineering school, because I focus on the engineering schools, right? But the lack of attention to global challenges or given where they are. And I say this because I have reached out personally and saying, look, I'd like to come in and either be an adjunct, or I'd like to consider being a guest lecturer. And I have not been taken up on this. And now, so here we have, we're a nation's capital. There are 100 and something embassies here. How can you not have a robust global engineering challenges program? But Arizona State, they're on top of it. You know, I watch them too. I'm so excited about what they're doing. So I like go online and look at what they're doing all the time. But they're on top of it. So I would say overall, I can't give an overall grade, but I don't find enough universities in this area.
In DC
I
area.
would give people in this area a C. They're barely passing. When I compare them against an Arizona State and a Purdue University, for example, which are not in this area.
Well, it makes sense, and there's a great contrast. And Purdue is, Midwestern U.S. That's so different from the DC area. That's a nice sample. That's a great question, Roxanne. Thank you for that, friends. We're almost out of time. We have time for one last question from everyone, and if you don't ask it, I'll ask a question. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that everybody else gets a chance. So, if we don't hear from anybody, I'll have to do it myself. If we have one comment from the chat box from Myron Williams in Kentucky. It says that your comments about creating partnerships among diaspora peoples is a great idea for our work. Thank you for that suggestion. Now we'll have to make it happen somehow, because we too are about sustainability. I have to ask a professional futures question, Claire, which is when you did this report, when you worked with your 10 global women futurists, what were the biggest differences that you found in having women write futures work than having men write futures work? What was the biggest difference or two?
I don't know if there was a difference or not, quite honestly. Because I don't know. I can say that I don't know that men, the reports I've seen men do, focus as much on the emotional state, because I've never really seen a focus on, like, for example, depression. That was very unusual. Like, I've never seen like an emotion or the need for aged care services. I'm not seeing all of those, like, kind of like women's emotional health concerns, right? But I wouldn't say that that's any scientific proof or anything I want to boast about. I just did it because I wanted to have somewhere where people hear what women futures are thinking about. And some of the women futures already said they want to do it again next year. So it's good that at least we can see what women are thinking about differently. But the bigger question in looking at this meme, the future is female, right? Is to really unpack the question: is women's leadership style and the way women think about the future going to really make a shift in the way decisions are made as women take up more leadership roles? That's a better question that we should now begin thinking about and seeing how we might answer that. And there was one study I would point folks to. There's a study that was called "The Future is Female," done in 2017. You might want to look at that and see what that survey said to help to sort of look at how you might introduce this issue in your classes or whatever, because I found it very interesting.
Thank you. And I think we are very privileged to have spent an hour with you as one of those female leaders in the world right now. I hate to end things, but we are at the end of the hour. And Claire, you You have been so generous, so passionate, and so striking in your thoughts. I want to thank you very, very much. This has been a delight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I offer to both David and my Roxanne and Cornell. Is Roxanne? No. Patrice and
Patrice.
Cornell. Certainly, if you need my help in anything, please feel free to call.
Well, that's one last quick question to ask you. What are the best ways to find you and contact you online?
Best place to find you is my email address, which is easy. It's my name. It's nelson.claire@gmail.com. So Nelson.
Claire at Gmail.
Yeah. And if you don't remember, just ask Brian. He knows how to find me.
So the easiest way as can be.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Brian. As I said to you all, my mom was a teacher. She taught. She was a principal at home in Kingston. She died last year. She also taught here in America for 6 years in Los Angeles. So I'm always happy to speak with people in the sector.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad that we can connect you. Friends, I need to quickly talk about the next couple of weeks on the Future Trends Forum. So stick around so I can give you that information. Tara, if you could bring up the next slide so we can see where we're going. And by the way, thank you everybody for good thoughts and good questions. This is a terrific event. Next week, we're going to change gears. Speaking of Arizona State, we're going to talk with Lou Pugliese, who is at Arizona State, and we're going to talk about digital learning and the return on investment for it. So what kind of tangible benefits we get from digital learning. He's at an unusual institution. He's shared a great perspective, so please come by next week for that. Now, also coming up for the next week and for the next couple of weeks, Tara, let's show the next slide, please. We just finished a book club on Soonish, and we're about to announce the next book club reading. It'll be a real surprise and a real pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to that. Is that a tease? We'll find out. Now, if you'd like to find out more or get more books for our book club, please go to the bookstore, where the world's only future of education bookstore, where you can get tons of great stuff from Future Transform guests and book club authors. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I hope you will. There are all kinds of ways for doing that online. So there's the hashtag FTTE for the Future Trends Forum and for the Future Trends Technology and Education Report. You know where I am on Twitter. There's Shindig Events on Twitter as well. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you once more. I hope your heads are filled with thinking about female future, female futurism, and global futures. Thank you so much. I'll see you online. Bye-bye.